Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm sorry, we're just facing some technical issues. Please give us a minute. Hi, one second. Hi,
Hello,
Kiruba.
Bharti. Hi, hi,
Finally,
hi.
sorry, there was some glitch there. I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
able to
I was
see you.
also trying to connect, but I was not able to see your live page then.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being with us here today. Let me take a minute to just talk about what we're talking about today. So at Bond, we're running something called the Periods and Patrakars campaign, which is a campaign to basically promote a lot of visibility on the role media has on reportage on menstruation. And in that process, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring different voices from various stakeholders to understand the issue from their own purview and eventually come up with a toolkit that can help media personnel report responsibly on menstruation. So before that, before we go on with the conversation, I'd like to introduce Kiruba, who's such an honored guest I am to be speaking with today. So give me a minute to kind of like briefly talk to you about what Kiruba has done with her life and the kind of like accolades that Kiruba has won as well. So Kiruba is a practicing advocate at the Supreme Court currently, and of India, of course, and is also the founder of Legal Initiative for Equality. She's a judicial activist striving for social justice and equality, and she regularly writes and represents a lot of marginalized communities in different sections. She writes both in English and Tamil, and she's been giving a lot of talks to various audiences in both international and national platforms. Even at this February, she was invited to talk at the Harvard India Conference on Indian judicial system as well. She was the first Indian to also talk at the Hague Talks at Netherlands. She's also the only Indian to be portrayed in the Cobra Museum of Modern Art, Netherlands, among 100 human rights defenders from across the world. She's been nominated to the Lawyers for Lawyers Award 2019, 2018 Ilyasin Global Leadership Prizes, as well as 2018 Frontline Defenders Award, Human Rights Tulip Award, and much more. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Kiruba, so let me begin by asking you, as what has been so before we go into building the context for how the media can do better, just your own personal experience of menstruation, your lived experience in the body of a menstruating person, as well as being from a Dalit community. As you hit puberty and the kind of changes that you went through, how was it for you to manage your periods, associate with the culture around periods, so on and so forth?
I feel very honored to be here today, Bharti, but this is a very difficult day for me. My grandmother passed away this morning, and I couldn't go because I'm in Chennai, and she passed away in Salem, my hometown, and because of this e-pass procedure, and this is a Sunday complete lockdown, and I was totally
Yeah.
affected. I'm really in a very bad state, but this is a very important very important discussion we need to make, and that is the reason why I was here. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's okay. Kiruba, we can do this some other time as
No,
well.
no,
We
it's
can
okay.
reshape.
It's okay. Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. anyhow, she is no more, and I won't be able to see her. But at least I could share my experience through which I could make sure that
Okay.
she's remembered. I mean, it's totally fine. No, she's. I mean, in from my experiences, I think menstruation is something which was not seen as that important as for it is for any other dominant caste. I mean, I'm sorry.
Please take a water break or anything else.
So I think since coming from a Dalit community, menstruation or
Yeah.
puberty was not seen as that important as other dominant caste communities. I mean, it was very casual for me. My sisters too, I have two sisters, and even when they attained puberty, we didn't practice any traditional form of thing, and they were made to, touch anything. There was no untouchability practiced in my home. And when I attained puberty, it was at the age of 12, and it was in my sixth annual. After my annual exams during that break. So my father made sure, and my father told everybody that I should not be made to sit alone, and it should be, in fact, before they recognized that I attained puberty, I was playing with my father. I was sitting on my on his abdomen. I was playing well, but all of a sudden, when I jumped down, then my mother realized that my dress was stained, and it was on May 1st. My father was at home. It was a Labour's Day, and I couldn't forget any of this. But honestly speaking, there was nothing done on this puberty or any other practices. And my mother told me that here you're going to bleed for next 10 days or 12 days, and you have to do this. By then we didn't have the practice of using napkins, or it is not that affordable. I mean, we use only waste clothes or old clothes, and even if we need to buy napkins, it would be some cheaper affordable napkins which would not help us during heavy bleeding, or we cannot use it for the whole day kind of thing. So it was not that affordable. And my family, we in a way we all suffer from very severe cramps. I mean, my mother's sister, my mother's mother, my grandmother who passed away today, and many of us, all the women in my family, we used to suffer from severe cramp. I mean, it's something more than cramp, and we wouldn't do anything. We couldn't do anything on the day, and we cannot go to work. But still, my mother has to work because we three children were there, and she has to earn for the family. So she used to work. But as a last child in the family, I had the privilege of taking a day's break during my periods. I mean, even my sisters couldn't, because they were studying 10th standard and 12th standard when I was, when they attained the puberty. So as a last child, I had certain privileges in my family, and even today I never go to courts. I can't even walk during my first 2 days of periods. And as a difficult, I mean, it was very peculiar for me to suffer from migraine just before my periods. So it was a kind of signal to me that I'm going to get my periods in the next 2-3 days. And it was like a whole week of suffering. And and I get all the aspirations during my periods, and only on my day of my periods I used to think about more things that I have to finish, more writing work, and many other creative works as well. But because
Yeah.
of this 1 week suffering, I couldn't do anything. But I think as a family, they supported me a lot. Even today, my mother understands this. Stomach pain has been a very big impact on our lives every month. I mean, she wouldn't trouble us on the first 3 days.
Mm.
And even now, when my mother, uh, just before 4-5 years ago, until 4-5 years, even my mother used to suffer from severe stomach pain and all. So I think we as a family, we had a support, except for affordable. I mean, now we are able to afford napkins, but not many of my family members or my relatives could afford napkins. Except for that, healthcare services, and also other healthcare services relating to cramps and
Mm.
physical health and also mental health during the menstrual cycle. Everything was very well supported, and I think I'm really grateful for my mother for being able to support me throughout the process. I mean, uh, for a person like me to attain puberty at the age of 12 and of 13 is something very early. I didn't understand what it meant. Then
Yeah.
my mother
Yeah.
told it will happen every month and you have to do this. And I right now I can't even imagine my early days of puberty. I mean, we were living
Yeah.
in a place with common toilet. Until I
Mm.
attained
Mm.
puberty, we were living in a place without toilet, and this
Mm.
toilet facility is also very important. And
Mm.
later, and my father was very supportive. We four women were there in the house, and my father was the only man, but he used to understand. He used to uh, buy buy cool drinks for us to comfort us. And I
Yeah.
think I have been gifted with a good family that supported me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and highlighting some of the wash issues, infrastructural issues that come with accessing healthcare during periods. But more importantly, the kind of privilege, the love and the support they've shown you, despite not having the privilege, right, to be able to tend for you and care for you during your periods or before periods, particularly because premenstrually has been a lot of your struggle with the menstruation itself. In contrast, can you also help us understand how has been your experience in the workplace? Uh, Whether it's been in an internship or whether it's been as you've been practicing law in these past many years that you have worked, how do you think the workplace has accorded support, care, and understanding surrounding menstrual pain, relief, infrastructure? Yeah.
I have a very worst experience in a workplace. For instance, I have been fired from an office for suffering from menstrual pain and as a woman for menstruating every month. And I think
Hmm.
lawyers from Dalit communities or other marginalized communities are not able to have access in the high profile offices where they practice certain kind of elitist privileges. And if you're not well, they would have other options, other juniors to take care of the cases, and the senior counsel would be the one who will be arguing all the cases. So as a junior, you don't have much work on the court. You have work in your
Hmm.
office, in research, in drafting, and all you have to do in the courtrooms is just take the brief and tell the senior that our case is going to reach. But as
Hmm.
a person as a lawyer from a Dalit community, I had access only to a law office that were taking only low profile cases or any not well paid cases. So on that
Hmm.
occasion, my senior would be running in the other court and I would be running in a different court, and we both have to argue in a case. So there was no chance that I could take a break from my office on the first day. But at least my seniors were understandable in the and well understanding in the high court. They understood well of my circumstances, so they used to grant me leave on the first day. But I didn't have the privilege to take break on the second day as well. So
Hmm.
2 days is something which we suffer, right? But I was allowed on the first day, but on the second day I had to,
Hmm.
gather me up.
Hmm.
I have to pull up together and go to the court. Otherwise, I won't survive.
Yeah.
Uh, and in the lawyer's profession, unless you're a woman who has a first generation lawyer in the family already, or who is
Hmm.
married to a lawyer, or whose father or relative is a lawyer, you don't get to enjoy any privileges of taking a break. You have to
Hmm.
do an extraordinary labor at least to survive in the profession, even if you're not able to succeed. Succeeding is a
Hmm.
different thing. After
Hmm.
these many struggle and all this efforts, if you're succeeding, then it's something good
Yeah.
that you have fought for, you have struggled for. But in order to survive, you have to go through all these struggles. That is the
Hmm.
situation of Dalit women lawyers. And when I
Yeah.
decided to move to the Supreme Court in 2014, I was struggling to get to office, and no one was ready to recruit me, even despite the fact that I passed the civil judge examination and I have
Hmm.
already independently argued and won landmark cases of transgender appointment and other
Yeah.
public interest litigation. So despite the qualifications, I persist. I was not recruited in any office, and the only office that recruited me after the other experience in different office was a Tamil lawyer's office, in which again, because of my migraine and stomach pain, I had to take a 4 days leave, for which he asked me to, I mean, he sent a clerk to my home, and
Okay.
the clerk asked me to come meet the senior on the next day. And when I met,
Okay.
he told I don't fit as a lawyer. I don't possess the quality to practice as a lawyer in the Supreme Court for the reason I'm menstruating and I'm suffering from migraine. And he also advised me to ask my mother to look for a bridegroom, get married, and settle down, because I need a nursing kind of thing, which was not true. It was just a 4 days matter, and it was not a regular thing. I might get over my migraine in the future months, and this periods could be just 1 or 2 days. But he in a way blamed me as if I was going to suffer this through all the month, and even if I suffer through, it is my right and it's a duty of the law office to provide me protection, safety, and my health care, which they didn't. And when I refused to abide to all these things, then he asked me to leave the office. Then I had to quit this office for the simple reason that I was a woman and I was bleeding. So even despite the fact that he had a daughter, and he says my daughter and my wife doesn't suffer as you do. They don't experience this much of cramp or this severe pain as you do. So there is something problematic with you. That was the exact statement he told me. So I think most of the Dalit women lawyers who want to progress in their career, especially when they want to reach the Supreme Court, it's not possible. And even if they reach, this sort of mensuration becomes an obstacle, which in my case made me leave an office and I was fired.
That's really horrifying to know. Also,
I'm sorry to
interfere
on this. I mean, when I was practicing in the High Court, I used to sit on the chairs. Okay, I won't be able to sit straight. So what I would do is I'll fold my legs and I'll sit on the chair in a comfortable position. Then the male lawyers who come to the courtrooms, they would accuse me of disrespecting the court and disrespecting the senior lawyers. And many times when an old male lawyer comes, he used to make me stand. Come on, stand up. I'm a senior lawyer standing. Then many times I would say, sir, I'm not well. Please let me sit. But they would think I'm a very arrogant person. And that is the reason why I'm not respecting other male lawyer or senior male lawyer. So seniority is something which is deep-rooted and entrenched in the entire career, seniority, face value. So if a judge sees you sitting, in a very comfortable position, folding your legs, you're finished. He thinks you are not fit to, you are not a lawyer, suitable lawyer to practice in the high courts, and you're not respecting the courtroom. So this will reflect in the arguments. So when you approach the judges, they will not respect your argument. They will not take your case seriously. And also there is something called appointment of advocate commissioners. So when they have realized that you're someone who is not respecting the court and you're not practicing the so-called conventional thing, they won't appoint you as advocate commissioner in the matter, in the courtroom cases. Yes, so such is the thing.
Yeah, and as problematic as it sounds, it's even more difficult to understand and bring a sort of consensus around workplace menstrual leave policy itself. Like yesterday, Zomato had announced it's for a company like Zomato, which is a big company, to kind of like say 10 days of menstrual leave. But the basis behind which it's come, we're not sure if it moves away from this rhetoric of menstruation is a liability or a menstrual labor and internally productive labor is a liability of sorts or not. So I'm really sorry in the sense that the kind of experience that you've had to be through is very, very problematic, and we need to raise our voices for the same. So, having talked about this, yesterday when we were having a conversation, you also spoke briefly about this sort of workplace related menstrual suppression that's becoming a sort of pattern, especially amongst the unorganized, underprivileged sort of communities in the labor force itself. So could you comment on that a little bit?
Yes, so I went to a multinational company here on the Women's Day, and I was talking about women's right and how we women support each other, and how, despite the fact there are many women in the HR team, there is no menstruation leave or periods leave. And then I realized most of the women who are in the higher positions or in the HR positions, they are able to take a day off, or they can work from home. They need not come to the office. But other labor forces, like women who are at the other services like post and scavenging and any other caretaking or any other care services in the multinational corporate companies, they have to come to the work. They cannot afford to work from home because their work is on the ground, on the field. So when I told about this menstrual leave, then many of the women told that they can't even think about it because they are being employed by the contractor, and the contractor will not allow them to take a day off, even if the company allows for a menstruation leave. So this is how the Dalit women who are marginalized. I don't want to restrict it to Dalit women, but all the women in at the margins, like even Muslim women, many women coming from the marginalized communities, they are forced to work despite the fact that even if the corporation is giving a menstruation leave, it is not applicable for them. So this applicability for certain services that does not directly that is not directly recruited by the company is becoming an implication. And also, if we talk of the textile industries, there are so many things happening in the textile industry, like suppression of menstruation, or in order to make them work 24/7, they are giving them pills without their consent, and the nature of pills, the side effects, or what it is going to do to their bodies are not at all known. This might also result in impotency or over bleeding, or so many things could happen. But in this particular circumstance, it was not discussed well. And there is a scheme in which if women comes to work for 365 days straight, they would be given a sum of 1 lakh or 2 lakhs rupees for their wedding, for which many women work for 365 days without a day break, even for their menstrual period. So such is the thing. And I need to tell about one particular incident in the south. I think it's in Kanyakumari, where Kuruva community women who go for selling the beads, because they do this traditional occupation, like weaving baskets, selling beads, chains, and other ornaments. And they also do this knife sharpening. So what they do is, when they were roaming on the streets to sell this knife and other things, they were arrested by the police, picked up by the police, because it is also work for them. When we talk of workplace, we talk only of sheltered places and other corporates. We don't talk about this street vendors or people who go on street for work. So what happens is, she was picked up and they were tortured for a week. In the meantime, she got her periods. She was denied her pads, and despite the fact she was bleeding, and the police, after knowing that she got her periods, she was beaten up with a lathi, badly beaten up, because of which she was bleeding for 25 days. She was not even given compensation. So she was harassed by the police when she was on the workplace. It was a workplace for her, right? So many Dalit women who are at least privileged in compared to Kuruvar women or tribe women, we get to have a space, and that space is also not that comfortable for us. I mean, I had gone to many companies for lectures, for talks, workshops, and it was only in one company I saw there was a napkin slot. I mean, there was a rack full of pads. Rest of the companies, they don't even maintain the toilets. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not talking about the multinational companies, but I'm talking about other factories and other
I
companies
understand.
where most of the staffs are women.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Can I also ask you to quickly talk a little bit about your experience with reaching out to the medical fraternity here versus your experience of, communicating and getting, being counseled by healthcare facilities abroad, by virtue of your travels all across the world,
Yeah, I think
particularly to
India is.
menstruation. Mhm.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think
sorry.
India is one of the worst countries that disregard the women health care or any other health care that related to women, especially
Mm-hmm.
menstruation, because
Mm-hmm.
we have already romanticized and glorified virginity and chastity, and as a
Mm-hmm.
reason of which menstruation is seen as something that women have to tolerate, they have to bear
Mm-hmm.
throughout their lives, and there is no other course of medical relief that they could afford unless they are super rich and they could reach any private hospitals and they have a doctor in their own families. So when I went to
Mm-hmm.
Netherlands, I vomited, I was suffering from severe cramps, and then the foster care, the family that was arranged to take care of me, they took me to the hospital, and I was
Mm-hmm.
advised with contraceptive method of treatment. And at the age of 32, I came to
Mm-hmm.
know about contraceptive method of treatment, and it was very
Mm-hmm.
shocking, and I was not able to, take it. I mean, why would
Yeah.
I take a contraceptive device for my periods when it's something, I was thinking it's something unrelated. And then
Mm-hmm.
on the second month, again, I was vomiting, I was taken, and then I was given three other options. Either you can go with the
Mm-hmm.
contraceptive pill kind of treatment, but you could have mood swings, emotional imbalances, or you could go for
Mm-hmm.
devices which will help you with this periods
Right.
pain, and if you want to get pregnant, you can remove the device. Or the third
Yeah.
thing is hormonal shots, which is not
Right.
available. I mean, I was not aware of if it is available in India. In that
Yeah.
circumstance, I was thinking I could do it in my country, I'll go back,
Yeah.
I'm afraid and all. But when I returned, when I approached the doctors are too conservative, too conventional, and they are not ready to talk about contraceptive method of treatment unless you are married. It is
Yeah.
applicable
Yeah.
only for married women. And if you are a married woman, they will even go to the extent of helping you with this contraceptive pills and other things, but they don't go for contraceptive method of device treatments, because
Yeah.
again we
Yeah.
are forcing women to reproduce, and this reproduction is forcing certain women to not opt for contraceptive method, and unless
Yeah.
you have two children. So when you ask
Yeah.
for contraceptive device, they ask if you have already children, and if you say yes, they'll ask if you have two children. If you say no,
Yeah.
I have only one child, they don't treat you with that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if a woman is physically challenged, then they are helping her with contraceptive devices.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they
Yeah.
don't. So when I
Yeah.
approached, and when I told them that periods pain is equivalent to heart attack, and it is
Yeah.
being treated seriously in the foreign countries, they told it is
Mm.
taken seriously because they have free sex. They have,
Yeah.
non
Yeah.
moral,
Yeah.
immoral sexual behavior, and that is the reason
Yeah.
why they opt for
Yeah.
contraceptive devices. Then I had to fight with at least 30 doctors here. None of them
Yeah.
understood, especially women doctors. And all
Yeah.
of and the only thing all of the doctors did was to accept it, accept with the fact
Mm.
that I have to suffer from pain, and
Right.
they all normalized it. Periods pain is
Mm. Mm.
something that they normalize and they don't care for.
Yeah.
On one hand, while women like me who are able to access the healthcare system up to one point or suffering
Yeah.
because of the negligence of doctors, maybe the gynecologist or any general physician. On the other
Mm.
hand, in the states like Bihar and Rajasthan, even in Odisha, if you are a tribe woman or if you are a Dalit woman and if you have come for delivery, the doctors, even without asking your consent, they place contraceptive devices in your uterus after your delivery.
Yeah.
You won't
Mm.
be
Mm.
conscious enough, but still they do
Yeah.
it. So this
Mm.
sort
Mm.
of differential treatment and this sort of negligence over the healthcare of Dalit women is being practiced across the Indian medical discipline.
Fraternity. Yeah,
I
for
can
sure.
say.
For sure. Yeah. So, Kripa, at this point, I'd like to draw our conversations more towards your outlook, like we've spoken about multiple things, your personal experience, your experience in a professional workplace, what you witnessed amongst labor forces, particularly Dalit labor forces that you've participated and engaged with, and the medical fraternity. Do you feel like even amongst the narratives that you've spoken about, particularly, if the media captures it with nuance, and if not, if there isn't an answer to that, what is your assessment, or what do you think is the way, how do you feel about the way in which the media currently reports on menstruation?
I think the media has not reported anything about menstruation. The only thing they report is about selling pads. They think if you wear a pad, you won't feel anything. And in a way, they try to insist that periods pain is something of mindset. And if you change your mindset, you won't feel pain. And when I see this napkin ads, when after wearing the napkin they would fly, they would play, they will win, it is something ridiculous and it's not real as well. So I think the media has not reported anything about menstruation. And even when there was a menstruation benefit bill that was brought tabled in the Lok Sabha, it was not even reported in the news channels, right? So this is the case. I mean, they don't report anything about menstrual benefit bill. They don't report anything about actual menstruation. And on the Women's Day, they conduct these cookery shows, not about how women should take care of their personal health or their menstrual health. There is everything is stigmatized. Everything around periods and menstruation is stigmatized culturally, socially, and that cultural social stigmatization has carried to the media spaces as well.
Media.
And women in politics, I can't imagine how they are actually surviving amongst that many men. I mean, they in Tamil Nadu is seen as a very progressive political space. But even in Tamil Nadu, they have to compulsorily wear sari. Unless you wear sari, you won't deserve as a political leader, respected political leader. You won't be respected enough. So sari is not a comfortable dress for many women, and they have to attend all the political meetings. They have to attend all the Lok Sabha sessions. And this stigmatization and this underreporting in the media has actually led to even worse, the worst scenario for many women who have come up in the public spaces rather than helping them out. I think we have to have public shows and like the other reality shows in which women are free to discuss about their body, their thing. And we all know that even breastfeeding is stigmatized in the country. That occasion, being an unmarried woman, you talking about your periods is you're inviting something. You're equivalent to immoral woman. Your character is assassinated. And whenever I write about my periods experience on my social media, I get so many messages on my inbox, all advisory messages, which advises me not to discuss these things on the open platform.
Openly.
I'm a woman and I'm an advocate. There are times I could become a judge. So if I become a judge, I shall not talk about my uterus or my body. So this is the kind of reaction, even in the social media, where you have every freedom to write about your body on your page. You don't have a head editor, right?
So tell me this, Kiruba, from, as a lawyer, what do you think, how can all of us as consumers of media, because we do so in vernacular languages, in English, digitally, hard print, so many formats of media itself, and we are constantly dissatisfied, not just with the way media reports multiple issues, but particularly on menstruation, because there is hardly any understanding and nuance. How can we hold the media accountable? Or what do you see from the legal perspective that media is liable to report more responsibly? What do you think are the ways in which we can hold them accountable?
So I think it should come from a policy decision that they have responsibility over, women's health care. So periods is not something which is unrelated to women's health care, and it is a primary healthcare issue of women. So we need to push, as if we were pushing for menstrual period paid menstrual leave, and also for this menstrual benefit bill, we need to push for women's healthcare, especially menstruation, as a discussing subject or as a healthcare policy in all the media houses and in all the corporates. So when you influence or when we insist on bringing menstruation as a women, as part of women healthcare system, it obviously applies for media as well, since they are also come under the corporate policies.
Absolutely.
Yes, so it will cover. And also, as I think we don't have a separate movement for bringing this issue up. Feminist movements have failed long ago. Even now we are talking about sexual harassment, but we are not talking about the abortion rights bill that was tabled in the Lok Sabha, that's going to be discussed in the Rajya Sabha soon. So the feminist movements should take this forward as a women's right thing, and it should be discussed in the all the policy making spaces and the HR spaces, governmental spaces. And when it becomes a topic of women's right, when it's become a legal issue, then it will be obviously reported in the media. So I am hoping for this maternity, this maternity benefit will elapsed, I think. What is it?
I'm not sure, currently updated. I'm not currently updated. I'm not so sure.
So it was brought, at least 2-3 years ago, and I think it should have lapsed, otherwise it would have been passed by now. So now we should push for this bill, and once this bill is being pushed again, the media will be actually forced to report something on the bill, and then we'll have more space in the media to discuss this.
Right. As I take some of your inputs from that response, a policy is a far more mainstay sort of overarching sort of a intervention that will help in filtering down the way media also reports menstruation. But many times we've seen the trend that a lot of things that the media reports, particularly around menstruation, is around what is being sensationalized. Like whether it's a Sabrimala issue, whether it's because some particular seer said something about menstruation, or just something as simple as that. And so do you have any inputs as a lawyer to talk about how we can move away and push the media beyond just looking at something sensational, topical, sporadic, to something that can be sustained, more nuanced, that can flow along various verticals on menstruation, from technologies surrounding menstrual technology, which we have spoken about very briefly, from policies, from legal aspects, from culture, stigma, so on and so forth. Do you think that there are any other tools or any other ways in which we can kind of like address this through activism or anything else that you can think of?
If I have to frankly speak, that's been going on my mind. It's never going to happen unless the media spaces are going to benefit out of it. Who is running the media spaces today? Almost all the corporates who wants to make money, and they make programs only based on their agendas. So if something is not coming under the agenda, they won't take it up. And Sabrimala issue was politicized rather than it was seen as a women's right issue, right? So media houses, they want to benefit out of this politicization of Sabrimala and politicization of women's body that has been menstruating, and then they brought it up as an issue. So I think we have a cultural problem, and when this cultural problem is being overlooked by iconoclastic, iconoclasts who come for debates, they are not ready to accept it. So what they do is, if a woman is progressive and she is outspoken about these issues, they don't even invite her for the next debate. She's been excluded from the entire media spaces, and she's erased altogether, and she becomes invisible, obviously. So this visibility of women who has been advocating on women's, menstruation rights and other women body related things are deliberately dismissed by this media houses, and unless it changes, I don't actually understand why women who are mostly working in the media spaces and who are journalists are not talking about this. It's only us who are talking, right? Even women
Yeah.
journalists are suffering much about this, and they are also
Yeah.
not allowed to take paid menstrual leave, and most of the time they have to run from pillar to post for getting something reported. But I have never seen any women journalists discussing about this. So the first advocacy or the first awareness thing should go to the women journalists, and when women
Right.
journalists talk about it, they will have programs about it. And women at
Yeah.
policy making level, I don't know how many women are at decision making positions or at the policy level or in the HR. Even women who are in the HR, they are mostly aligning themselves with the ideas of men or with the male
Yeah.
dominance in the company. They are not
Yeah.
having any independence, or even if they have independent decision making power, they are not using it for the benefit of women who are working in the company. And I think it's a very big problem for us. So unless this thing comes as a policy level thing, and unless women who are already working in the spaces are talking about it, we women talking from outside is going to have only a little impact over the entire issue.
True, true. May I also add that, as much as, these kind of narratives around, that lacks agency and autonomy around menstruating bodies are very pervasive even amongst, people who menstruate in the media spaces. We've seen some conversations from very stalwart journalists reducing other people's menstrual experience, saying, I don't need period leave, assuming that because I don't need period leave, that means nobody needs period leave. But as last line, I want to first thank you so much for having this conversation with us. Two is that our deepest condolences to you and your family about your grandmother's death. But more importantly, please end with a line talking about how you think menstrual rights is a human rights issue, very briefly, just for like a line or two, and pleasure to have spoken to you today.
I mean, that's what we have been talking since the beginning, right?
True.
So,
True.
anything that relates to women's body or women's mental health or women's physical health is a basic human right. But we have been dismissing all these things, and we have been focusing only on civil rights. And when it comes to women's rights related to her body, we have been talking only about sexual rights and abortion rights. But this sort of issues that affect both mental and physical health of women is not taken seriously. But I think whatever a human being is suffering from, and if a human being needs to discuss something for the well-being of a particular individual, then it's human rights. So I think for the well-being of women and for the welfare of women, periods rights should be, I mean, periods leave or any periods issue should be seen as a basic human rights issue. And then we'll be able to have a very good legal framework which will provide more benefit for the women during menstruation.
Yes. Hope to get in touch with you soon and connect and hopefully work together as well. Thank you so much, Kiruba, for doing this. I've also tried to very briefly glean some of the comments into questions, so we can take everything else offline. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.